Okay, so good evening to all of you, right? So let's continue that process. We had covered the sources so far, and in fact we have taken one more lecture for the sources, but then we are just trying to make sure that everything has been covered beautifully. That's the target anyways. So if the number of lectures is increasing, that hardly matters. Okay, fine. So now since we have covered the sources, so as per the agenda, we are now going to see the previous year questions that have come from the same topic, correct? So we are just going to see the questions which are there from the which have been asked so far from the sources, right? So here in the discussion, we are going to more or less incorporate the questions that have been asked in last 14-15 years. That's the target, right? So look at the questions. So it will be since we have seen the content, so we'll be more discussing about the format here, that what is the format that we should follow for writing the answers. Okay, fine. So the first question that was asked in 2019, and of course that format was very different, but then yet we will take into that consideration. So the question is that in what ways the accounts of the Greco-Roman and the Chinese helpful in reconstructing the social history of India? That is the first part of the question, correct? Now look at the question. In fact, in the last class only we had been discussing about the Greco-Roman and the Chinese sources, correct? Specifically the Greek sources and the Chinese sources. And then and mind you the words, right? They are very important, so that's why you keep in track on the words. So it's saying Greco-Roman words. So when it says Greco-Roman, it means at one hand the Greek writings, on the other hand the Roman writings such as Pliny and all, they are also included here. So it is a sort of very general kind of term that they have used, and that's why all sort of things are used here. Then it comes to Chinese, that also we have covered in the last class. Okay, so Greco-Roman and the Chinese helpful in reconstructing the social history of India. Now I think the way we have discussed, the format is very simple. In the first part of the answer, what we are supposed to do, we have to discuss first in the introduction what we are going to write, what is this Greco-Roman and the Chinese sources. How you are going to write about that? You will be simply writing these two civilizations were there which were very interested in India, and that's how they were interested because of due to different reasons. Such as somebody is interested in India, why? Because there was a very flourished trade going on between the two, and the Chinese were important because of the religious relations, right? So that's how we'll be writing, okay, these are various civilizations interested in India due to different reasons, and what are the examples of these writings. That's it. This is the introduction which is done. Max to max, what we can mention, you can mention about the centuries in which they have been writing. That's point number one. Now it comes to that, how come they helped in reconstructing the history of India? So when it comes to the question of reconstructing, again I hope you remember what I had been telling you, that don't try to write the answers in a very random manner. You'll be dividing that what political information they provide, economic information, social information, religious information and cultural information. That's it. The things are done, right? So don't try to take it into different direction. Rather simply you'll be discussing about this part, and that's how you can present this idea. Yeah, this is how, since it is a 60 mark question, and that's how there were two different questions are associated with here. And then it comes to how far is their information corroborated by the other contemporary sources. I think now this is also a very simple thing that we have already discussed in our class, that why it's needed to corroborate it with the other sources, because there are certain limitations. So what will be writing, there will be three parts. So in the first part you'll be writing the information that we have been getting after the introduction. In the second part we'll be writing about the limitations with these sources in certain points, right? And third part will be highlighting that due to these limitations, ultimately it is a sort of better solution to juxtapose it with the other sources in order to get better sources. Now what is the how you are going to conclude it? You can quote Romila Thapar here. She talks about the corroboration, right? And that's how we can reach to a better information. That's of course, you can mention. Likhna nahi hai. You just mention. You can take the example, such as when it comes to Mauryan Empire, Indica seems to be a very good source to know about it. But then since there were so many limitations, and that's how when Indica is being juxtaposed with Arthashastra and Ashokan inscription, that gives better information to us. That's the format of this. I think it's clear. Let's move to the next question. Fine. What light do early inscriptions in the literature throw on the status of women in the politico-socio-economic sphere? What light the early inscriptions and literature, right? Throw the status of, throw light on, what light do early inscriptions and the literature throw on the status of women in politico-socio-economic sphere? Now this is the question. In 2010 it was asked, it was of 60 markers. Okay, fine. Now if I'll ask you to frame this question, so from where, first tell me from where you are going to start. Whether we should start the answer with the inscriptions and the literature or we should start with the status of women. कहाँ से शुरू करेंगे? What is the main demand of the question? Correct, na? So we should start the answer with the. आप वही गलती कर रहे हैं, मैं वही तो पूछने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ.
Socio economic status of women through inscription of literary sources. We have to show like.
Correct. That is correct. From where to start the answer? Whether we should start the answer with the sources or we should start the answer with the woman?
I think sources.
So no, that is incorrect. We have to start the answer with the woman. Why women? The question is not asking about this. The main thrust of the question is the status of woman. Correct now? Now they are asking ki don't write randomly. You write with the help of these sources. But the main thrust of the question is the status of woman. Now how you are going to begin this answer? You are going to begin this answer with this ki, in history, or history is always interested in knowing the status of women or the gradual transition of the status of women across the periods. Correct? The similar thing is even applicable to India, because in order to understand the status of women, we get good insight from the inscriptions and literature. Got the point? There are two lines and you have conveyed the whole key idea of this particular question. Now in the second part, the question has already simplified to you. Okay? In the second part, you have to basically write the status of women. The main thrust of the question is the status of women. But why? What is the good thing they have done? They have already specified the three terms. Correct? So how you are going to deal with this answer? You will be now dividing answer point number 1, point number 2, point number 3. So first I will be picking up the political transformation. And mind you, in this particular word, question, you will be using the word transition multiple times. Transition, transformation, interchanges. Correct? So we will be picking up the first one, politico. And what we are going to show in this, the status of women kept on changing as per the consolidation of patriarchy. Correct? So we'll start with the IVC, no much references, early Vedic period, textual references, literary sources, they have already said. Then you can write about the later Vedic period, and then Mahajanpada period, then Mauryan period, the post-Mauryan period, Gupta period, post-Gupta period. Correct? So you can, actually it's a 60 marker question, you can extend. Sometimes students ask this question that whether if we do not have the content to write the answer. I believe that history is such a subject where there is no dearth of content. The moment you change your framing, there would be good number of content. Ye question, if I am not writing in this way, in that case, maybe there is some sort of crisis of content. But the way I did tell you, in that case, you can take it to n number of words. So that's why there is no crisis. You can show it in terms of transition. And I told you, whenever it comes to status of women, I will, in fact, in the ancient time, in the beginning only, I made it very clear that transition is the most important thing. And as per that only, you need to frame the answer. So whatsoever transition is there, we'll be referring. Let's say when you talk about the status of women in different periods. Now, what is your duty? That we have to refer either this source or this source. Whatsoever is suitable, we'll be mentioning about that. In the same way, then you'll be writing in this way, introduction, and after writing the introduction, what I'll do, how I'm going to frame this answer, introduction, and then when the moment you come to the body, you'll be giving the heading, the political transition, correct? And then you'll write one paragraph, actually it's a transition, it does not remain same, and then it justifies the way you have been dealing with phase wise. And then you'll be dealing with phase wise, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 points, whatsoever points are there. Then the moment you come out from this paragraph, again, now you'll be giving another heading, that is economic. Again, a paragraph you'll be writing, and then again point format, like what sort of transition you find. Then it comes to the last one, the socio, okay, and again the transition will be listed by you. So okay, this is like how you have covered the main thrust of the answer. But then you won't leave this answer because it's a 60 marker question. Now what next you should write? You should somehow analyze reasons because of what the status of women is declining over the period. So how come the patriarchy is consolidating? That will be writing. And with the consolidation of patriarchy, ultimately the women had been losing their control over these various things. Okay? Then you can also write some counter arguments. Counter arguments as in what, like we believe in the recent history writing, we believe that there is no phase where women were either totally subjugated or totally free. It is a subjective idea. It is a comparative term, correct? So we'll be saying in every phase some exceptional cases were there, and in every phase, like women kept on enjoying certain rights. Both the things are there. So we'll be just writing with this. We'll be quoting certain historians, such as like you can quote Kumar Roy and all these scholars, and that's how we'll justify it. And then towards the end, in the conclusion, what we'll be doing, as I told you that whenever you have been attempting the answers from from let's say this thing from any social issue, correct? What I suggested you, link it with the present. You'll be writing if we need to understand the status of women in the contemporary society, the historical insight would be the best to understand that. And I think we can see that gradual journey of the women's subjugation and the liberation. That's how I'll be concluding this answer. Is that clear? Okay, next question. Whenever you have been writing the questions, there are two things always be very particular of. Okay? Understand the main demand of the question, number one. Number two, what do you need to do? What you need to do? You highlight the important terminologies in the question that can be converted into the subheadings of the question, and that's how you're going to frame your answer, right? So this is very important. Now, on the basis of contemporary sources, access the nature of banking and usury in ancient India. Again, it's the repetition of the same question. It was asked in 2013. It's just a 15 marker question. Okay? And the year is 2013. Now understand this point. On the basis of contemporary sources, that's one part. Nature of banking and the usury system. So the main thrust of the question is not the sources. The main thrust is the usury and the banking system. Correct? No? So you have to start your answer with the banking and the usury system. Correct? You can also start your answer with the the changing economy, because whenever you're you'll be writing in this way, whenever the secondary economic activities are getting very flourished and developed, it needs the usury and the banking system. Even in ancient Indian history, we can find the insights of these things in the history, and that's how yeah. What next you can do while writing the introduction? You can write some examples, max to max. 1 or 2 examples you have written. That's how you'll be writing introduction. Now it is asking you that on the basis of them, access the nature of banking and the usury system. So here now after writing the introduction, the moment you come to the body part, correct? What you need to do further. In the body part, first of all, you'll be writing about that what is the various function of this banking and the usury system, right? Or else you can start the best will be with the need of this. Why they were the people felt the need of the usury and banking system. So you'll be writing about the increasing trade and commerce that will be associated with various phases. But you're not supposed to write it segregately, but you can write it this way: the post-modern period is considered as the apex of the second urbanization, and this is the period when we start finding the references of these things. Since India was well connected with respect to the trade with the Western world, and then further it is connected with the Southeast Asia and China as well for their trade. So in order to carry on this trade or continue this trade, these kind of systems were very much needed. And that's how we start finding the various references, right? So that also you can write, and then the various functions. what kind of things they had been doing, such as giving loan, keeping the saving that money, and then of course all these kind of things. And then here you need to quote certain examples. That's it. Okay. Such as you can quote the first of all the Buddhist text. In the Buddhist text you find it. So you can even start your answer with some later Vedic references of the usury system that you study in the Vedic period. There are there is usury system, and in fact some insights are there. Buddhist texts, they deal beautifully with this, and then certain inscriptions specifically issued by the guilds, right? And Arthashastra is also dealing with this. So उनका references देके आप उसको बहुत सारी चीजें बताएंगे उसमें, and that's how we'll be writing answers, right? And you can, while ending the answer, if I would be at your place, in that case I'll be connecting with the modern situation. Okay, how come this is quite helpful in growing the business in the present times? So that gives us the insight or the understanding how this was helping the ancient Indian economy at that point of time. That would be the conclusion of this answer. Correct? Am I fast?
Little bit so that we can jot down points.
I think it's all about understanding. Points we have already discussed, the answers are there with you. Okay. So I'm just giving you the insight how to frame. Look, I have already provided the answers. Correct na? So I think that's not a problematic thing, but wherever you feel that I need to discuss more, you can let me know. That elaborate it a little bit. I'll be writing in a separate page how to frame this answer. जहाँ पे काम चल रहा है वहाँ पे. Ultimately, look, the purpose of everything is to cater requirements. Got the point?
We are realizing our mistakes. Like whatever when I used to write an answer, I used to look at what is being asked. Like if early Vedic is mentioned, so I used to write a generic introduction.
That's the problem.
I'm not connecting it with.
Frankly speaking, when I'm evaluating the scripts now, I must tell you, 90% people, they fail in understanding the real demand. Do you know why the people are not able to get very good marks? There are two different types of students I have seen. One students, he fail in finding the real demand of the question. They cannot understand. So the moment you have been failing, right, ultimately they are not expecting great amount of content from you. They are expecting that whether you are able to understand the real demand of the question or not. What happens mostly with the students, whatever they do know regarding or around that topic, they just write it in the answer. But the UPSC is not expecting directly speaking, frankly speaking this. They're expecting the core, idea should be fulfilled in the answer. That's category number one. The second category is that the people somehow understand the demand, but then they are lacking content. So the moment you have understood it and then you have given, I'll say only 50% of the content. They are never expecting that you are writing any answer like scholars. Just 50% of the demand you have fulfilled. Now while fulfilling this demand, what should be there? There should be certain arguments. There should be certain examples. And there should be references of certain. Khatam. There's no magic. Why the people fail in answering? Because they have never understood the history conceptually. उनको लगता है PYQs में जो पूछा है, मैं कई बार कहता हूँ PYQs में जो पूछा है वो टॉपिक पे पूछ रहे हैं, डायमेंशन नया पूछ रहे हैं. मैं बार बार वही बात कहता हूँ, लोगों को समझ नहीं आती वो बात. ठीक है, आप तो वही लिख के आ गए जो आपने पढ़ा है, बट वो पूछा नहीं ना. ठीक है, तो उनको तो सीधा समझ में आ गया कि इसको समझ ही नहीं कि एग्जैक्टली. सो वो मत करिए. ठीक है, अंडरस्टैंड. यू आर हैविंग लेसर कंटेंट, fair enough, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. Write the lesser content, but then try to fulfill the real demand of the question. Okay, coming. Yeah. Fine. The next question is, evaluate the ownership of land in ancient India on the basis of literary and the epigraphic sources. Acha, one more disclaimer. Right now I'm not covering those topics. These are some from basically some topics of ancient India. Correct na? So we haven't covered them, but I'm just telling you that how to frame the answer. On in coming time we'll be covering even content on them also. So maybe right now you're lacking some content, but the structure should be very clear. Okay. Next question is, evaluate the ownership of land in ancient India on the basis of literary and epigraphical sources. Now as same problem. ठीक है, अब लोगों को लगेगा कि अच्छा इसमें पूछा है, they have asked about the literary and the epigraphic sources. It is just the sort of secondary part. It is asking about the ownership of the land. Correct, na? So this is the main demand of the question. So you should start your answer with the ownership concept. Okay? So if I would be there, in your place, how I'm going to start this answer? Ki the land ownership has always been debatable in India. Correct? And it was claimed by the colonial historians that this institution of land ownership was established by them only, which is not completely correct. Even in ancient India, we do find good insight over the ownership concept in the contemporary literature or the inscriptions. Khatam ho gayi, theek hai. And then I can max to max I can quote certain examples, right? Ki what are the texts which are dealing with this concept. So this is how I'll start with this concept, and I'll make it clear here only in the introduction itself that it is a debatable question. So whenever you have been dealing with any question which is debatable, you should start with this word only, that the evaluator should understand ki first of all you have the idea of this. Okay, you are not dealing with in a very simplistic term ki it's a debate. And the second thing, right, that can make your journey further easy, because in the beginning only you have made it clear. So when we will be writing the contradictory statement, that won't be unfair. Why? Because you have in the beginning itself you have made it clear ki it's a debate, and debate matlab people are not having the consensus over this issue. Correct? So that is going to become simple. Now it comes to evaluate the ownership of land. Now this question is getting into a completely different direction. Okay? Now actually they are not very important. You have to refer them, but then you are not supposed to some focus on them. So basically there are three debates with respect to land ownership in India. What are these three debates? जब ऑनरशिप की बात आती है तो why to start the answer with the community ownership? The moment it comes to ownership, I think you should start with this idea, individual ownership, है ना? And then you should start the answers with the, then you should write about the community ownership. Correct? Now, when it comes to individual ownership, individual ownership, there is one king is owner, there is one intermediary is on owner, and third Rayat is the owner. Correct? And community ownership is very simple. These four dimensions are there, and one by one we will be handling all these four dimensions. While handling with these dimensions, we will be quoting certain sources. That's it. We will be discussing land ownership. When it comes to Gupta period, we will discuss this particular topic. अभी हम cover नहीं कर रहे उसको, ठीक है ना? Okay. Okay. While using the accounts, क्या नाम? Nitesh. While using the accounts of foreign writers, historians must distinguish between statements based on hearsay and those grounded in perceptive observations. Elaborate with examples. 2014, 15 marks. Now that was the question. Correct? Now let's highlight the important thing. While using the accounts of foreign writers. Okay? One idea is very clear here. The question is precisely based on this. But then they have also highlighted one another term, historians. It means that it is all about the different interpretation of historians. So whenever such kind of questions are there, be alert that you need to write at least some of the scholars. Correct? Must distinguish between statements based on hearsay and grounded in perceptive observations. Correct? Now how to frame this answer? Now in framing, while going for the framing of this answer, how I am going to proceed? I will be first writing ki what are this? Foreign accounts. जिसको हम कहते हैं एक सिंपलिस्टिक टर्म में हम क्या कह सकते हैं? डेफिनेशन ऑफ द फॉरेन अकाउंट्स. which sort of accounts could be kept in the category of foreign accounts. So we'll be precisely talking about the Greek, Roman and the Chinese text. And at the end of the introduction, what we are supposed to do? Certain example. Majority of the people do not do it. आपको कुछ examples दे दीजिए. While writing the answers, always keep in mind कि somebody who hasn't studied history is trying to read your answer, so the image should be very clear in his mind or her mind कि अच्छा इसको हम foreign text कहते हैं. So I'll be writing कि while writing the Indian history, we have been using so many foreign accounts, like what are the foreign accounts, and then examples. That's it. Correct? Now coming to the next part. Now in the next part we'll be writing basically what that which is called as the body part. In the body part it should be divided into two parts. So they must distinguish between the hearsay. So in the first part we'll be writing ki what are the various writing based on hearsay. So we'll be writing about Pliny, we'll be writing about Strabo, Nearchus and all these people, Herodotus as well, correct? आप उनके बारे में लिखेंगे, बोलेंगे they have never come to India, but they have provided ample amount of information which are actually not based on their own observation, correct? Then we'll be writing about some another text, that is observation. So when it comes to the text which are observation, correct, which are based on observation. So we'll be quoting which text here? Indica. And we'll be writing that what are the beauties of Indica, correct? So that's how you have cleared ki what are the sources based on hearsay, what are the sources based on observation. हाँ लिख सकते हैं ना, बिल्कुल लिख सकते हैं, हाँ बिल्कुल लिखेंगे ना, ठीक है, of course you need to mention, ठीक है. So that's how you have mentioned about this. And then you'll be giving the views of scholars, what they are saying for this, correct? And when it comes to the end or the conclusion of the answer, conclusion that is juxtaposition. Ultimately every source does have certain problems, limitations, and that's why it is best, whether it is based on hearsay or observation, ultimately we must juxtapose it with some other sources or the Indian sources, and then we can find a complete picture. That's the conclusion of it. So whenever in general question is there, like we feel free in concluding the answer in this particular manner only. Okay, fine. How far can the ancient Indian Shruti literature be used as historical source? Simple question. Now the point is that there should be a clarity in your mind that what is Shruti literature. So you should start your answer with Shruti literature. Basically, what is the definition of Shruti literature? That should be followed by example of the Shruti literature. That's it. And towards the end of your introduction, you will be writing that they are very helpful in history writing. These are the various information extracted from the Shruti literature. Correct? So then you'll be writing the positive parts. Now how we are going to write? Polity, economy, society, religion, culture. 5 points we'll be making here. And the various information. One example, you won't be writing this information we draw, this information we draw. You'll be writing they are giving us good insight on the polity. Example. Point wise. You'll be writing introduction, then one important statement, right? Or one statement, there will be writing कि undoubtedly the Shruti literature is very helpful in the reconstruction of Indian history. These are the various information extracted from the Shruti literature. What sort of information? Political literature. In one line that these are the various like political literature will be writing. It gives us the information about the early clans, their conversion into like political state and the various features of it. What examples? Like that is this. Same way, economy, society and religion. Correct? So we'll be writing about all these kind of things. But then it is asking ki how far can the ancient Indian Shruti literature be used as historical sources. So since it is asking how far, it means that it is problematized by them. Correct? So if like the question is like this way, the Shruti literature are helping us in reconstruction of ancient Indian history. discuss. In that case, you won't be much emphasizing on the negative aspects, limitations of it. But since it is questioning, and that's why you have to write about the limitations. So in the second part, this is one part of the answer. In the second part, you'll be writing the limitations. Correct? And then it comes to the final part, that is the conclusion. Now, how you are going to conclude? Okay, fine. So in the okay, you'll be simply writing कि though there are certain limitations, correct, but yet we are very much, or historians are very much dependent on the Shruti literature for writing the history of the Vedic period, because as per Rumila Thapar there is some embedded history which is there. If it is juxtaposed with the other possible sources, they are giving us good information on the incident. खत्म हो गया, ठीक है? साइंस है यार, हिस्ट्री. This is one question that I have repeated many times in my test series. Yet people are not able to write the correct answer. They are not able to frame the correct answer. Now look at this question, 2017, 15 markers. Art and culture are reflected to a far greater extent than the political history. Correct? Art and culture reflected in far greater extent than the political history in the epigraphical sources. Now, you just first tell me this question should be started with which part? Introduction में क्या आएगा?
Epigraphic sources का information is that they focus on holistic understanding like political history and art culture.
बताओ. Is he saying right?
Actually, epigraphic क्या है?
नहीं, actually क्या है, मतलब confirmly बताओ. ऐसे केबीसी में खेलोगे तो थोड़ी चलेगा यार. ये this is not able to decipher. Ayur, you are lost. I think my speed is more. I'm going very slow. Contrary to my nature. Ayur is trying to figure out from the answer itself. Okay, look. Art and culture are reflected to a far greater extent than the political history in the epigraphic sources. Now, you guys just tell me that what is the main concern or the demand of the question, whether the information or whether the source.
Political information.
वो secondary part है. Primary information is about the epigraphical source. Question is about the epigraphical sources. वो पूछ रहा है कि यार ये सही करता है या गलत करता है. Epigraphical sources आर्ट एंड कल्चर ज़्यादा बताता है या पॉलिटिकल हिस्ट्री ज़्यादा बताता है, ये पूछ रहा है. अब information is the secondary part. The question is primarily based on the inscriptions or the epigraphy. So ideally speaking, you should start with the definition of epigraphy. It's very simple. कहा ना मैंने साइंस है, ठीक है, दिमाग लगाने की जरूरत है थोड़ा. That's the logic of practicing the PYQs. Correct. और हर बार उनके इनोवेटिव क्वेश्चंस आते हैं. आप सोचोगे कि ये वाला तय करके जाओगे तो अगली बार फिर यही पूछेंगे. हाँ, तो ये ऐसा नहीं. So you should start your answer with the epigraphical sources. That's one thing. Now इसका थोड़ा दूसरा part भी tricky है. So you'll simply define what are the epigraphical sources along with certain examples. खत्म. ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा क्या कर सकते हैं? एल बासम को कोट कर दो कि according to एल बासम they are very important information. That's it. हो गया खत्म. Now it comes to art and culture are reflected to a far greater extent. मतलब it is not simply saying that art and culture and political history both are reflecting in the inscriptions. It's not asking that. It's asking कि art and culture are reflected to a far greater extent than the political history. Correct na? So you have to prove it wrong because you have to comment on this. Not wrong, but you have to go for a sort of critical evaluation. So you'll be writing what? Yes. Art and culture. Now when it comes to the body part, you'll be writing yes, art and culture is reflected. Art and culture is reflected. Now in the art and culture, he'll be writing about architecture, he'll be writing about sculpture, he'll be writing about language, right? He'll be writing about script. These are 4-5 important things which are reflected in the inscriptions. And in fact, to a certain extent, you can even write about the religious sort of thing also. That's part of culture. Okay, how come the inscriptions are reflecting this? Correct? So basically what you are going to do, you'll be writing, yes, there are very good sources to know about the art and culture. Normally, it's being ignored by the people, but then it does give us very good, insight over art and culture. Correct? That's part number 1. Body part number 2. But then you'll be writing, but it would be incorrect to say that it is only giving us insight on art and culture, or it is giving lesser information on the other dimensions. We can say that we can extract the information related to polity, economy, society as well from them. You will be writing in that paragraph. You will be mentioning that not only art and culture, it provides us information on polity, economy, society, administration, all these aspects, right? In fact, it is used for very good, for reconstruction of the political history, since it provides on various dimensions of polity. That's it, correct? And then you'll be writing points. The same points what we had been discussing in the last class. Extent of the empire, genealogies, correct? Then the principle of the administration, correct? So you'll be making different points. Just one line you'll write in every point and one example of the inscription, correct? That's such as you talk about the extent of the empire, example Ashokan inscription, और समुद्रगुप्ता's प्रयाग प्रशस्ति. टाइम है 2 लिख दीजिए. About tax the tax relaxation. So you can write so many points here. So you'll be writing all these points. Okay? So now the conclusion. Now you just tell me what will be writing in the conclusion. Now this is the question and how you are going to frame your conclusion.
It is incorrect to say that epigraphical sources provide information about the art and culture, but it also provides other dimensions.
Correct. But again, if it is being juxtaposed with the contemporary sources, we can get a better insight over this. Khatam. Okay. Next question. How did the early Indian historical tradition, as reflected in the Itihasa Purana, emerge? What are the distinctive features of this genre? Very tricky question. लोग ढेर हो जाएंगे ऐसे क्वेश्चन में. Now first let us try to understand the question. How did the early historical tradition, right? So it is saying early historical tradition, and they are giving the answer also as reflected in the Itihasa and Purana. That means epics and Puranas emerge. So it is asking about the process of their emergence. Correct na? And then it comes to the second question, what are the distinctive features of this genre? 2018, like 6 साल पहले पूछा, 20 marks का पूछा. ठीक है? No. He'll be writing. ये थोड़ा tricky question. So let me answer this question. So it is asking how did this tradition appear? So he'll be writing that normally in the introduction he'll be writing, normally it is believed that the historical sense disappeared among the Indians. Correct? It is mostly believed in the Western writings that Indians never had the sense of history. On the other hand, the Western people had it. They refer Herodotus, who was there in the 6th century BC, and he had been writing about these things, correct? History and all. So there was a quite clear understanding for history among the Western people. Now I am not thinking whether it is right or wrong. They had it. And they reject. So he'll be writing, you can even quote here, as per the imperial authors or imperial school of history writing, it is believed that the sense of history was very much missing among the Indians, because the scholars like Herodotus and others were missing in India. But then it is incorrect to say, because there was a historical tradition even prevailing in India that appear in form of Itihasa Purana. Correct? That's the introduction. Now it comes to the body part. Now in the body part, what is the main thrust of the question? How did it emerge? What do you think? How does the, what is the way through which this particular concept emerges that we should write down about them?
The transformation which are going.
Very nice, very nice. Western scholars believed that India is basically a country which is spiritually sound. There was no great materialistic development. What sort of people they were? Nomadic people. Correct? No civilization was ever there. So since there was no great amount of material achievement, and what points I had been discussing somewhere, ki life negation and all these things. So Indians were least concerned about this thing. So since there was no materialistic progress, there was no state formation, there was no urbanization, there was no secondary economic activities, right? Nomadic life, because of what? This sense could not have developed among the Indians. But it is incorrect. Right. Actually, you will be writing about all these developments which were there in India. You can quote IVC, you can quote Mahajanpada period, this first urbanization, second urbanization, state formation. So you can write in points all these developments which were there, which might have motivated even the ancient Indians to write the history of that period. Correct? And then you will be writing actually what we see, the Itihasa and Purana, they are the reflection of this. Maybe it is written in a more symbolic way, as Rumila Thapar is writing, that the history is not directly written here, they are embedded, but then they are there. Correct? So he'll be writing how come the changes and the transformation happening in the society motivated the ancient Indians to write it. And you'll be taking this particular answer to what point? To Rajatarangani, Kalhan. 11th century तक आप लेके जाएंगे. And don't have this confusion, right? It is the medieval and we can't use it. Now we do not know that whether early medieval is falling in the medieval or ancient. Now as per the new authors, early medieval is falling in ancient. And in colleges now we have been teaching the early medieval in ancient segment, not in the medieval segment. Correct? So have the clarity. Rastarangani, you all till 12th century you can quote any example. Feel free. So we'll be ending it with the Rastarangani, that this culture was over the period evolving and finally it is getting concluded, or it is getting reaching to its culmination with the writing of Rastarangani. Correct? So that's how we'll be writing all these reasons. Just a second. All these reasons were there because of what this tradition of history writing was reflected. You can add one more thing, how come, or what are the core content of history, what we find over there, such as you can talk about state formation, the various things, the expansion of agriculture, जो हम महाभारत में discuss कर रहे थे, पुराणास में discuss कर रहे थे, and that's how the first part will be answered. Yeah, एक second. Yeah.
So could we give the example of that many people know, and all such epics also?
Epics of?
As an example.
Of course, na. Yeah, right, na.
Ancient to the till 11th or 12th century.
You can give any example. But since it is precisely about the Itihasa and Purana, so you'll be writing more about the Puranas and the epics only. Correct? But then you can end your answer, the first part of the answer, by taking it to Rastarangani. Correct? So there was a gradual evolution of the sense of history among the Indians, and it was gradually getting more and more matured. Correct? Okay, then it comes to the second part. What are the distinctive features of this genre? The distinctive features, how come they have been writing, such as they are sometimes they are giving direct information on the political events, okay? Then they are providing the geographical features, then the providing the various transformations in the society, such as economic expansion and the consolidation of the society, religious development, so they have covered all these dimensions. So these dimensions could be converted into points, and this is the distinctive genre of this literature. That's it. Fine. Do you agree that the archaeological evidence often helps in the better understanding of the literary sources? Correct? Again, a very tricky question they have asked. In 2019, it's a 15-mark question. The question is saying कि do you agree that the, like let's first, ये भी important है, do you agree that archaeological evidence often help us in the better understanding of the literary sources? तभी मैं कहता हूँ कि आप PYQ करते रहिए, PYQ से हमेशा क्वेश्चन नहीं आते. अभी हम सोर्सेस सारा ही कर रहे हैं ना 15 साल का, कितने रिपीटेड क्वेश्चंस मिले हमें? नहीं मिले ना. तो वो एक्सपेरिमेंट करते हैं क्वेश्चन से. Now this question is again tricky. Understand the question. Let me first ask you only. So now this question is, if I'll try to simplify it, it is saying कि do you agree on this statement कि the archaeological evidences are helping in better understanding of the literary sources. Correct? That is giving you the insight कि there are two different kind of histories which are there. One which is based on archaeological sources, one which is based on literary sources. And that juxtaposition, what we have been concluding, like again and again, that juxtaposition is the base of this particular question. That how come it is helpful? Correct? So you'll be writing that, how I'm going to start this answer. थोड़ा tricky है, थोड़ा नया है, but then learn these things also. ठीक है? You'll be writing that Indian history is majorly based on literary sources. Correct? You'll be starting with this, that Indian history is majorly based on the literary sources. Because it started during which period? Colonial times. Colonial times. Correct? You know the meaning of this now, what I wrote just now? Why did it start of course the Indian history writing in the modern times started during the colonial period. Now since India was colonized, they were not going to spend so much amount of money. There was no branch, there was no department ASI which was working. ASI was formed earliest in 1880s under Cunningham. But with the death of Cunningham, the department also got shut down. And then again got restarted on 1904. Then since then the ASI was continuously working. Correct? So उतना जाने की जरूरत नहीं. आप इतना लिखेंगे since started in the colonial times, and that's why it is primarily based on the literary sources. But then he'll be writing कि after the establishment of ASI, now archaeological sources were also being used. And that's how history is reaching to a sort of completion, or Indian history is reaching to a completion. Correct? Fine. This is the introduction. Now you have to prove not prove, you have to somehow evaluate that archaeological evidences are helping in understanding the literary sources. Now I'll be writing, since there are two histories in India, which is initially it was primarily based on the literary sources, and that's how they have explained the history on the basis of this. So they have given their own interpretation which is based on the literary sources. Okay? And then we'll be writing कि after the coming of archaeological sources, we definitely started having a better interpretation of this. But then it is not valid until and unless you justify it by giving one example.
Sir, the Egyptian gets Mesopotamian literary language was deciphered through a stone found there.
The question is about Indian history.
Sorry.
So get the example from Indian history only. इसका एक example कोई बता सकता है सोच के?
Post-Mauryan's के time पे better understanding archaeological sources.
कैसे?
Buddhism rise because
कैसे?
the stupas were constructed.
आप दे रहे हैं बट आप रट्टा मार के दे रहे हैं. I think there might be many references. I'm just giving you one example. The post-Mauryan period is explained as Brahminical, Correct? I think this concept you all must be knowing. It is explained as the period for the Brahminical revivalism. And it is based on what sort of sources? How come we say it? How come we call it the period for the Brahminical revivalism?
Sri Lankan text.
Okay, there's one example is the Sri Lankan text. और बताओ. कालिदास तो 6th century में जाके लिखते, 5th century में. Yeah, there are certain sources that should be fixed in your mind. Silapadikaram. Oh, that's in Sangam. Why to go to there? अरे यार इस समय कौन सा एक आदमी बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट आदमी है जो बहुत सारी किताबें लिखता है पोस्ट मॉडर्न पीरियड में. There's one person who has been writing so many books and is an immensely popular person. Panini, 4th century BC, महाजनपदा टाइम्स. यही मैं बता रहा हूँ, ये सब नाम याद रखो और उसके साथ याद रखो कि जब हम महाजनपदा पे आंसर लिखेंगे तो पानिनी को कभी भी कोट करना नहीं भूलेंगे. बाय एनी चांस, मतलब एनी हाउ वी हैव टू कोट पानिनी while writing the answers on here. A similar person is there in 1st century BC. Patanjali. Correct? And he had been writing the book Mahabharata. Fix it in your mind whenever you have been attempting any answer on the post-modern period. Never ever miss mentioning this person, Patanjali. कहाँ भास है यार अभी? भास, शूद्रक, ये सब कब के हैं? प्री गुप्ता क्या होता है? प्री गुप्ता आज तक पढ़ा है? पढ़ा है आज तक प्री गुप्ता? गुप्ता पीरियड. भास, शूद्रक, कालिदास. अरे whenever it comes to Sanskrit literature, it is precisely there in the Gupta period. अरे आप पूरी हिस्ट्री पढ़ते हैं कि there was a revival of Sanskrit during the, not revival, in fact birth of Sanskrit as the famous form of literature was Gupta period. इस महाभाष्य. सो जब भी आप महाजनपदा पीरियड में आंसर लिखें, रेफर पानिनी. आपको जितने भी ये गणसंघास है, जितने भी आपके ये मोनार्किकल स्टेट्स हैं, एंड देन वेरियस सॉर्ट ऑफ पॉलिटिकल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स एंड ऑल रेफरेंसेस आर देयर इन पानिनीज अष्टाध्यायी. The moment it comes to post-modern period, undoubtedly the Buddhist texts are quite helpful, but along with that, Patanjali's Mahabharata is the best text to know about that period. Correct? So basically, which text? Mahabharata. Sorry, Mahabharata. Correct, na? He is talking about Pushyamitra Shunga performing all the rituals. And then later on, Kalidas is writing about Malvikagni in Malvikagni Mitra, ki the successor of Pushyamitra Shunga, he was called as Agnimitra. He is also performing certain rituals. Late text hai. On the ground of these texts, we can say कि it shows that it was the period for Brahminical revivalism. Brahmin rituals are being performed. The Buddhist people are being killed or they were assassinated, right? So this gives the reflection or this gives the perception that this period was basically the period for the Brahminical revivalism. And then he'll be giving the examples of the archaeological sources. And then in the archaeological sources, we'll be writing about all these stupas, chaityas and viharas. They were mostly constructed during the post-modern period. Correct? Sanchi was reconstructed. Rest of the stupas were constructed in Sanchi. Sarnath got reconstructed. Correct? So most of the places, and in fact majority of the chaityas got developed in the western part of India under the Satavahanas, such as Nasik, Karle, Bhaja, Ajanta and all these, right, during the postmodern period. So he'll be saying that now these archaeological sources are giving a different reflection of it. And that's how, by corroborating these information, these sources, we can reach to a more neutral and unbiased history. That's it. Correct? Okay, next question. Okay, the next question is salient features of cultural tradition of South India as reflected in the Sangam literature. ठीक है, okay. Again a good question, ठीक है. Very good question. इसका जवाब अब आगे कोई और देगा. I remember that scene while standing on the podium. It's a very good question. I think you guys didn't watch that film. कौन सी फिल्म थी यार? तनु वेड्समैन. Very good question. Correct. फिल्में नहीं देखते हो? नहीं. हॉलीवुड की फिल्में देखते हो? वो भी नहीं देखते हो? अच्छा नहीं, कोई बात नहीं, अच्छी आदत है. लेकिन salient features of, like, why did I highlight it? Of cultural traditions of South India as reflected in the Sangam literature. Correct? This is a very simple question here. Ultimately, you need to write about the cultural traditions which were there in Sangam age. Why? Because there is only source to know about it is the Sangam literature. Correct? So first, you can start the answer with both, I'll say. You can start the answer with Sangam literature also. या फिर if I would be there in place of you, I'll be starting with a distinct culture where in South India.
सर जैसे इसके अंदर मतलब जो दो लिटरेचर है
अहामैनपुरम नहीं,
दो लिटरेचर
हाँ सेकंड में है,
वो तो पोस्ट संगम में होते
उसको मानते हैं हम यूजुअली संगम का ही पार्ट है. कंपाइल उसी में पट्टू पट्टू और दूसरा है पडिनेल किलकिनक्कू. ठीक है. एंड एतु तोगा इज ऑल्सो देयर. दीज थ्री आर कंसिडर्ड टू बी द क्रिएशन ऑफ थर्ड संगम अमाउंट. ठीक है. कंपाइलेशन बाद में हुआ उनका. ओके.
संगम का तो कोई सोर्स अवेलेबल
नहीं अवेलेबल. वो कहते हैं कि इट वॉज पार्टिसिपेटेड बाय गॉड्स.
हाँ वो शिव आए थे.
हाँ, तो इसीलिए गॉड्स की तो चीज़ें हम नहीं कर सकते ना कंपाइल. दूसरा सतोलक कपियम. ठीक है. एंड द थर्ड फ्रॉम थर्ड दिस इज अवेलेबल. करेक्ट. ओके फाइन. सो आई विल बी स्टार्टिंग विद द डिस्टिंक्ट कल्चर ऑफ साउथ इंडिया विच remains different from the North India, right? So this is what I'll write, and then I'll be writing कि majority of the information of this Sangam age South Indian society we do come across through Sangam literature, correct? And then you'll be coming to the body part. Now in the body part, what are the things we are going to discuss? We'll be discussing different aspects of the culture. Now you guys are going to tell me what are the different aspects of the culture.
Polity.
Culture का part नहीं है.
Festivals.
Can you start this answer directly with a festival? Do you have any information on the Sangam festival also? How you are going to start this answer? क्या लिखेंगे? Culture में बारे में लिखना है. You just think what can be written here in the culture, right? सबसे पहला जो है the thing which is the part of their culture is the Kuti based society. It's a different clan based society. That's called as Kuti in the case of this. Correct? So, we'll be writing this information. Okay? You can write about the heads of various Kutis also, such as Peru Makan, Ko Makan, and then Velar, Vedir, Kaizar. ये सब term आप इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं. It was a clan based society, ठीक है, which was led by some of the leaders, and they were known with this name. ठीक है. Then we'll be writing about what sort of society it was. Correct? So it was a sort of society which was in the phase of transition. It was not a fully developed society. It was in the phase of transition. That is one part we'll be writing. Okay. Third, we'll be writing whether any division was there in the society or not. If any division is there, though normally we do not find any information for that. Fourth, we'll be writing about their religious belief and the religious belief precisely. Correct? Fifth, we'll be writing about the woman. Correct? Sixth, we'll be writing about any extra information is there. In that case, we'll be writing. These will be several points. पत्नी पलाई ये कौन सी टेक्स्ट है? आप कंफ्यूज कर रहे हैं. इस पत्नी इज द कल्ट.
Actually, I am forgetting the book name. Actually, two books which are written on women's condition.
Not exactly women's condition. These are the epics, such as they are Silapadikaram and Mani Mekli.
We can mention.
Of course, you can mention about the literature. Correct? You can mention. Yes, I think that's a good point that you have reminded. Literature, you have to mention. करेक्ट. इसका कंक्लूजन क्या लिखेंगे? इट्स अ वेरी जनरलिस्टिक क्वेश्चन.
क्वेश्चन से ही निकाला के लिखना है.
क्या बताओ, क्या लिखोगे?
वैसे तो बॉडी और क्वेश्चन को मिला के वही चीज इन सारी चीजों को लेकर मतलब शो करता है, बस यही बताना.
तो जनरल बात होगी. तो हेंस इट इज प्रूव्ड.
हेंस इट इज प्रूव हुआ है.
क्या लिखोगे? क्या लिखोगे? आप सोच के देखो. व्हाट यू आर गोइंग टू राइट हियर. अप्लाई योर ब्रेन. No idea.
Way of life, our
You'll be simply writing कि if you really need to understand the present day South Indian society and culture, correct? The traces, roots can be traces. The hero cult is still being is popular over there. ठीक है. There are 1-2 examples you can quote us. That's why you'll be writing कि for understanding the modern day Tamil society or the South Indian society, the roots are here and that's all. खत्म हो गया. Right?
So most of the time in the society के ऊपर क्वेश्चन है तो
कर लिंक करो गण से. मैं तो बोलता हूँ, जनरली बोलता हूँ, लिंक कर दो. सोसाइटी से, कल्चर से, रिलीजन से कभी भी क्वेश्चन आ जाए, एंड उसका जाके करना है एकदम से. अगर कोई डिबेट उबेट नहीं पूछा जहाँ पे देयर इज अ फर्म कंक्लूजन, मतलब अगर कंक्लूजन है, अगर उसका आपको लगता है, तब तो बात अलग है. इफ देयर इज अ फर्म कंक्लूजन, इन दैट केस यू हैव टू कंक्लूड इट. अगर ऐसे ही इन जनरल क्वेश्चन है, लेकिन आई विल तो ऑलवेज कनेक्टेड विद द मॉडर्न टाइम. स्टेटस ऑफ वुमेन है आज के इससे, वर्ना सिस्टम है आज से कनेक्ट कर दो, गोत्रा सिस्टम है आज से कनेक्ट करो, कल्चर है आज से कनेक्ट करो, कनेक्ट इट. ओके फाइन. Now, moving to the next question. The next question is, evaluate the significant political features of the post-modern northern India. Evaluate the significant political features of the post-modern northern India. What are the main sources of it? Again, I hope you can understand this point we have discussed. This question is not about sources. This question is about the basically the significant political features of the post-modern northern India. That's it. करेक्ट ना? देन इट इज सेइंग कि यू डोंट राइट इट रैंडमली. मैं तो हमेशा कहता हूँ पहले से, आई हैव बीन टीचिंग टू द यूपीएससी स्टूडेंट्स सिंस 2013. सिंस देन आई हैव बीन टेलिंग द पीपल कि कोड सोर्सेस. यू आर नॉट कोटिंग द सोर्सेस एंड दैट्स व्हाई दे आर आस्किंग कैटेगोरिकली कि कोड सोर्सेस. ठीक है. व्हाट आर द मेन सोर्सेस फॉर इट, राइट? सो आई थिंक देयर इज नो कंफ्यूजन अबाउट द सोर्सेज ऑफ दिस पीरियड. Post-modern period is primarily about the Buddhist sources, and then you can quote the various sources, Buddhist sources. That's one thing. What are the second important? Undoubtedly. What are the other sources? अब आप फिक्स हो गए लिटरेरी सोर्सेज में ही. हाँ, बाकी आ जाओ. आर्कियोलॉजिकल सोर्सेज. देयर इज अ लिस्ट ऑफ बुद्धिस्ट सोर्सेज. वी कांट राइट अबाउट ऑल ऑफ देम. ठीक है. Yes, your text example is not wrong. In fact, this is very important book. You should definitely mention it. Correct. There are some examples of literary sources, some example of archaeological sources. This is the period from where you can find that there is good number of good varieties of inscriptions are being written, and the coins are there. Correct. So we'll be quoting all these sources are there, because we can't write it with respect to the sources directly. Okay, so we have mentioned the sources in the introduction. You can mention it somewhere later. And then it comes to significant political features. I'm not discussing it right now. There are multiple features such as decentralization is there, satrap system is there, right? The dual rule is there, diarchy or dual, not diarchy, dual rule is there. So there are multiple features. Take it, satrapa system and all these things. The new principle of kingship is there. ठीक है. Secularism is there, right? So there are so many features of the polity what we can. The shift from the eastern part to the western part is there, correct? So these are political features. और हमको इसको बताना है कि while giving the points, if it is possible for us, we'll quote one source. Okay, from this source we get this information. That's it. It's done. Correct? Okay. So what we'll be writing in the conclusion of this answer? What we'll be writing in the conclusion of this answer? सोच के देख.
Political system समराइज करके अगर हम
नहीं, ये आदत छोड़ दो, ठीक है, जस्ट लीव दिस हैबिट. स्कूल में चलता है वो, है ना. मैं होता तो मैं इसको कैसे कंक्लूड करता, आई वुड हैव कनेक्टेड द पोस्ट मॉडर्न पीरियड विद द नेक्स्ट पीरियड, and I would have continued कि how come these features continued in the next period also, and that became a perpetual feature of the society.
Kingship became much more.
Kingship and decentralization, land charter, Satrapa, there were so many things. मैं इतना डिटेल में नहीं जाऊँगा, मैं इतना बोलूँगा कि in Gupta period there were many of the features of like in a post-modern continued, such as this and this. So we can say कि post-modern period have taken played a significant role in shaping the nature of polity in India. Correct? That would be the. I told you this also in the first lecture. Connect it with the future development, because in ancient India, transition does play a very important role. So whenever you are getting the chance to connect it with the previous things, right? Sorry, later things or even the previous things, right? So you can do it. Or else, like it can be written in this way also. That the transition that could be noticed from the Mauryan period to the like Gupta and the post-Gupta period, that can be precisely noticed in the post-Mauryan period, which came up with certain features which became the perpetual features of the Indian polity later on. That, so अब इसमें जो भी आप experiment कर डालें, ठीक है? Fine. Next, foreign accounts as a source of ancient India. Ancient Indian history may have been some advantages, but also have a few shortcomings. Citing appropriate examples, examine the statement. Right. Now, can you find it a repetition of the question? Can you call it simply repetition?
not exact but kind of.
Correct. We can say that there's one dimension of it got repeated. Correct. But when you saw the question there, it was only based on hearsay. It is asking about the shortcomings in general. So this is just one shortcoming. This is not the all sort of shortcoming. Correct. So okay, it is like partial repetition. I can't say it is complete repetition. Now this question is saying, like, look at the statement: foreign accounts as a source of ancient Indian history may have certain advantages, correct, but also have few shortcomings. Now you will be telling me that whether the advantages is the core of the question or the shortcoming is the core of the question. Core of the question. Very nice. Advantages. Look at the statement: foreign accounts as a source of ancient Indian history may have some advantages. Correct. You can't exclude it properly, completely. But then this is not the core of the answer. So how you are going to frame this answer? So you just tell me in the introduction. You'll be writing about the. You'll be writing about the definition of these foreign accounts and then examples of these foreign accounts. Again, it is in general. They'll be quoting about both Greek, Roman, and Chinese, right? Greco-Roman and Chinese. Then it comes to what? It is saying that there are certain advantages are there. So in the body part, he'll be starting with the certain advantages, but then you won't be giving proper space or much space to it. So such as 15 marker questions is there. How मतलब ज़्यादा space भी नहीं हमारे पास यहाँ पे. What I would have done, I would have made a circle, and I would have written the advantages. And then certain advantages, such as they are based on observation, contemporary references, right? Yeah, exactly. So yes, since it is not the main part of the answer, but then I need to convey it, why to waste my time and energy? I would have made this diagram and certain advantages I would have written, because like that's it, kaam chalega mera. And then the next part I would have come to the shortcomings, correct? Now this is core of the question, and that's why like proper in point format I would have written the shortcomings with examples.
Sir, can we put that Indica's example that for ants, that gold mining ants and
You can write any example that provide when you have been writing that.
More interesting things.
मोर इंड ऑफ कोर्स जो भी हम कल की क्लास में हमने किया वो सारी लिस्टिंग कर दीजिए आराम से, एक एक एग्जाम्पल देना है. हाँ ठीक है ना. रोमांटिसाइज इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट. हाँ बिल्कुल कोट कर सकते, या ऑफ कोर्स Of course, like the वो बना sectorial biases मैंने एक point कराया था ना, that is the head. Be very particular about the headings, because your headings are like visible first. So when your evaluator sees your script na, like the first thing he notices or she notices is the headings. So headings को हमेशा historical terms में लिखे, sectorial biases, correct. Now this is a more like a sort of genuine term, वो समझ जाएगा, इसको पता है अभी, ठीक है, तो वो चीज़ हमेशा है. तो ये चीज़ें हैं. So then we'll be writing the shortcomings, citing appropriate example, examine the statement, right. So yes, you have done all the three parts. You have written the shortcoming. Now how you are going to conclude this answer? You have given the relevant examples everywhere. Like in every point, try to incorporate certain examples. Now the point is that we have to conclude it.
So we could say that they have written many things about Indian society and Indian political system and economic system or all over things, but they have romanticized the facts and they have written such important facts about.
You have already highlighted the shortcomings. You have that. This is the main part of the.
Exactly.
So now in the conclusion, there is no need to again highlight the negative
They
aspect.
have given negative and positive thoughts both.
आपने खूब लिखा नेगेटिव, आपने तो लिख दिया वो चीज़ें.
इतना ही कि
नहीं लिखना है, नहीं लिखना है. आप क्या लिखेंगे? Though it is having certain weaknesses, but yet they are very helpful in the construction of Indian history. Once it is juxtaposed with the contemporary sources, somehow they make the picture complete. खत्म. So आपने shortcomings ऊपर बहुत लिख दिए, अब highlight नहीं करना, आप बोलेंगे yet, despite of the shortcomings, they are very helpful in history writing. Correct? Max to max you can highlight कि despite of this, they are so helpful that there are certain parts of Indian history being constructed with the help of them, such as Chandragupta Maurya. But then they become more relevant sources when they are juxtaposed with the contemporary sources. Khatam. Okay. Fine. Kalhana's Raj Tarangani is the best example of history writing in early India. Correct? I think this part we haven't covered yet. Raj Tarangani I'll cover separately. And I think right now this is not the period to discuss it. Roughly I'm just telling you. Kalhana's Raj Tarangani is the best example, undoubtedly the best example. Correct? But then I think this answer must be dealt only once you have the proper facts. Facts as in मैं नहीं बोलता हूँ कि कलहन इतने से इतने बजे पैदा हुआ था, ठीक है? Not the facts. The point is that there are certain parameters on the basis of what we evaluate whether it is fitting in the criteria of history or not. So you should know about that, right? So what are the criteria? I have already discussed. Like it is a text which is very particular about time, a text which is very particular about space, a text which is very particular about authorship, a text which is very particular about the sources, a text which is very particular about interpretation. History is not merely the description of the events. History is basically about the interpretation. Frankly speaking, they all appear in Raj Tarangani. They all appear in Raj Tarangani. Correct? And in fact, he is so particular about everything, and he is himself writing, "Ki look, we are not very sure about the time. I am not very sure about the sources of this period also. I have used the mythical sources here, and that's how I am this is my problem." So he is evaluating everything. He is writing everything by his own, and that's how he has been writing. So I think it is undoubtedly the best example. Correct? Considering the time period. This is the same period. Even after that, the Muslim histories are being written, and they were not following these criteria. Raj Tarangani, a book much before the Muslim histories, the medieval histories, he had been writing, but then it is an accurate source of history, undoubtedly. Correct? So we'll discuss Raj Tarangani separately. तो अभी मैं ज़्यादा इस पे elaborate नहीं कर रहा हूँ उसको. Okay. How do comparative study of languages, archaeological sources and vast corpus of Vedic literature help to determine the Aryan problem in India? Okay. Now, the important words in this, how far the study of languages, the archaeological sources and the vast corpus of Vedic literature help in determining the Aryan problem. Now you guys are discuss. कब पूछा ये? 2023. अच्छा last year ही पूछा है. 15 marks. Now you guys tell me that what is the core of this particular question? Aryan problem. Lock कर दे इसको. So the core of the question is Aryan problem. So don't get confused. ठीक है? It is not about the various things. So what is it? What exactly is asked in the question? That how come these various sources are helping us in locating the Aryans or that problem? So how we are going to start this answer? We are going to write about the Aryan problems. Now what are the Aryan? What is this Aryan problem?
About their location.
About their
Foreigner or native.
This is the problem. Every debate regarding the Aryans is revolving around this. There is one group which is saying कि they were the indigenous people, India से ही है, और एक ग्रुप कहता है वो बाहर से. प्रॉब्लम ये नहीं है कि वो बाहर से कहाँ से है, ठीक है. प्रॉब्लम ये है कि whether they were from India or not. Correct? That's the question. So in the introduction we'll be writing कि what is this Aryan problem. And we can even write that this is not only a political, but not only a historical, but even a political question. Correct? And that's why there is so much writing, history writing on this particular dimension, which is based on the various sort of sources. Correct? And then we'll be coming to further interpretation of this, that is the body part. And in fact, like I do not know whether you are aware of this or not, but then basically there are two theories about this Aryan problem. One is the migrationist theory, one is the indigenous theory. And all these theories are based on different sort of sources, and the sources are this only. Correct? So when we'll do the the Vedic period, we'll start with this question. So the primary content of this question is not coming from the sources, it's coming from the Vedic period. But then it is like, भाई मैंने कहा ना कि मैं पहले बोलता था, आप लोगों ने नहीं सुना तो उन्होंने लिखना शुरू कर दिया. जल्दी बताओ भाई, लैंग्वेजेस के हिस पे कैसे करते हैं? उतना तो आप सब भी थोड़ा बहुत जानते होंगे. It's being connected with the Indo-European language, correct? Then the Dravidian language, that's one idea. ठीक है? Then it is about the archaeological sources. You know about some of the inscriptions which are there in Central Asia, correct? सुना है या नहीं? हाँ ना? Exactly. Hittite and Mitanni. ठीक है? And then it is Vedic literature. Now there are certain things which are being extracted from the Vedic literature. The Sanskrit word had been used here. That's the problem. ठीक है? So हम उसको इस तरीके से फ्रेम करेंगे. Fine. I think this is a very simple question. How far the Sangam literature acts as a window into the social and cultural tradition of ancient South India? It's more or less the similar question. ठीक है? How far the Sangam literature? Now actually we do not have any scale to measure that how far. We'll be writing that what are the information that we have been getting through the Sangam literature. And then at the end we'll be writing, in the absence of other sources, this is the best source available with us to know about the Sangam literature. But then it is based on the sources. So we'll start the answer with the Sangam literature. Correct? I think probably the last question. Examine the defects of Al-Biruni. Again, I think there is no point of discussing this question. Al-Biruni हम डिस्कस नहीं, अभी मैंने कहा ना Al-Biruni एंसेंट में आते हैं, ठीक है ना? हाँ, एग्जैक्टली वो चेंज है ना, याद रखिएगा. सो एग्जामिन द डिफेक्ट्स इन अल्बिरूनीज असेसमेंट ऑफ इंडियन सोसाइटी. हम अल्बिरूनी पे बात करेंगे तो प्रिसाइजली इंफॉर्मेशन बेस्ड है, ये सोर्सेज बेस्ड है नहीं, सोर्सेज के टाइप से लगता है, ठीक है. सो दीज आर द वेरियस क्वेश्चंस व्हाट वी आर सपोज टू डिस्कस ऑफ दिस, ठीक है. अब लेट्स कम इनटू अ डिफरेंट डायमेंशन ऑफ दिस, ठीक है. इसमें मैं बहुत ज़्यादा आपको नहीं करूँगा, बट देन आई विल बी जस्ट गिविंग यू सर्टेन क्वेश्चंस. इनफैक्ट आई विल बी फॉरवर्डिंग यू लाइक दिस पोर्टल में, ये भी अपलोड होगा साथ साथ. दीज आर सर्टेन क्वेश्चंस. These are the questions which are, you just do one thing, you have a look over these questions once. I'll be back. You just have a look on these questions. कोई क्वेश्चन अटेम्प्ट करेंगे आप यहाँ पे? मैं दूं एक? अच्छा चलिए, एक क्वेश्चन में आप सोच के रखिए तब तक। कौन सा क्वेश्चन है? चलिए, ये वाला क्वेश्चन है, थोड़ा सोच के रखें। लेट्स थिंक फॉर द फ्रेमिंग। एक तो टारगेट हम कर ही सकते हैं, हाँ यही करिए, थिंक फॉर इट। टफ क्वेश्चंस है ना सारे? हाँ
सेकंड ठीक है, पुराना डिपिक्शन ऑफ डायनेस्टी
कल ही पढ़ा है वो।
ये वाला ठीक है,
कल ही पढ़ा है।
ठीक। हाँ ये थोड़ा मैंने जान के उसको मैं हटा रहा था, फिर मैंने ऐसा चल रख देता है, अदरवाइज दिल टूट जाएगा। नहीं, मैं जान के ऐसा किया है, लेकिन देयर इज नो पॉइंट ऑफ गिविंग यू सर्टन लाइक नो सर्टन सच क्वेश्चंस जिसका कोई यूटिलिटी ही नहीं है, ठीक है। ऑफ कोर्स आई वाज डेस्परेटली गिविंग सच क्वेश्चन, थोड़ा ब्रेन एक्सरसाइज करवाना चाहता हूँ, और मैं कुछ नहीं करना चाहता। मुझे भी नहीं पता कि वेदर दे आर गोइंग टू आस्क दिस क्वेश्चन, बट देन डेफिनेटली द न्यू डायमेंशंस, करेक्ट। सो एटलीस्ट इट विल हेल्प यू टू थिंक, फ्रेम करना। सो लेट अस डू वन थिंग, लाइक आई बी दिस पेपर विल बी अपलोडेड टू यू, ठीक है। और जब हम पर्सनली कभी मिलेंगे या किस पे करेंगे तो हम थोड़ा बहुत डिस्कस कर लेंगे इस पे। हो सकता है कभी क्लास में मैंने डिस्कस कर लिया कुछ क्वेश्चन, सो दैट्स विल कीप ऑन डूइंग दैट, ठीक है। सो इट विल बी पार्ट ऑफ द प्रैक्टिस ओनली, करेक्ट। सो विल बी डिस्कसिंग, ओके। लेट्स से दिस क्वेश्चन एक बार हम सोच के देखते हैं, ठीक है। सो इन व्हाट वेज डू द पुरानिक अकाउंट्स रिफ्लेक्ट द ब्राह्मणिकल वर्ल्ड व्यू? So one thing is pretty sure that this question is basically about the Puranas, and it is saying that it is reflecting the Brahminical worldview, and how do they marginalize the marginalized alternative narratives in the ancient India, correct? The very tricky question it is, but then it is not like that much complicated. In the last class itself I had been telling you about something. I told you that what was the basic purpose of writing of the Puranas, you remember? I told you that society was expanding, they needed to integrate them into the system, and that's how the Puranas were being written. So what Puranas were exactly doing, they had been integrating even their religious and the social systems also, and like they were being presented in the Brahminical version, correct? No? That's how it was there, correct? Now the question is saying, in what ways do the Puranic accounts reflect the Brahminical worldview? So according to them, like since there's nothing to represent this alternative narratives, when Brahmanism is integrating one tribal community, is there any channel through which we can literally know about their tradition or their things? No, no. So they have been presenting the Brahminical worldview. So what they did, let's say there is a god called as X among the marginalized section. Now this god X is considered as the incarnation of Vishnu. So now this is marginalized the alternative narrative, correct? And what it did, it imposed the Brahminical idea over them. And it did not happen in just one part. It happened in every domain. It is just one religious domain I have been telling you. Let's say in society. You know that in the tribal society, the women had been enjoying more freedom. Correct? With respect to many things. But then what happened? The Brahmanism had been ultimately imposing their social system over them. And then that was considered as the ideal society. Correct? So it is like, this is the main crux of the question. So we'll be starting the answer with what? The definition of Puranas. कि what are these Puranas? जो हम कल बात कर चुके हैं, ठीक है? And then we'll be writing that what was the basic objective of the Puranas. So the way it is called as fifth Vedas, the way it was trying to, or it was to facilitate the integration of the local people. And then he'll be writing how come they have been doing it and how they have presented this Brahminical worldview. And then the second part he'll be writing once they had been presenting the Brahminical worldview, they had been marginalized the alternative narratives. Okay. So that has presented a Brahminical version of the society in India. That would be the conclusion, correct? And in fact, in the conclusion, he'll be writing the dominance of this understanding even in the present date. Correct? That's it. सोचने से सारे आंसर्स बन जाएंगे, थोड़ा सोचना पड़ेगा. So think on them. ठीक है? That's why for the practice purpose only I have been giving you. So they can be written their answer can be written from the existing information. Maybe not 100%, but of course 70%, 75%. And this is the core demand of UPSC. With the available information, we need to write about them. Correct? That's it. So that's all about the first unit, right? So we are just done with this part. थोड़ा वक्त लेता है ये मुझे पता है. This is such a part which always consumes time. And then there are only certain topics. IBC थोड़ा वक्त लेती है, तो ऐसे ही कुछ topics होंगे. Okay. Fine. So now we'll be moving to the next unit. That is the Neolithic period. Of course, as you know that there were very less number of questions are being asked from the Neolithic. You won't find so many questions being asked from the Neolithic. Frankly speaking, there are 3 topics. I would like to tell you something, a magic. There are 3 topics. One is prehistory. So far, majority of the questions had been asked from Neolithic. They are never asking the question from the Mesolithic. Though potential is there, but they are not asking the questions. There are 2 things from where the questions can be asked from the Mesolithic period. One is about the paintings in the Mesolithic, but then I believe that was left free for the GS part. वहाँ पे पूछ लेते हैं, यहाँ नहीं पूछते हैं, ठीक है? But the question can be asked. In fact, the transition which was there in the medieval Mesolithic period, from there also a question can be asked. From Paleo to Mesolithic, and from Meso to Neo also. This transition. अब चलो हम Neolithic वाला हम Neolithic में मान लेते हैं, लेकिन ये transition पूछ सकते हैं, but they are not asking the question. So majorly this. The second is Chalcolithic, and third is Megalithic. In a time bracket of 6 years, you will find that they are being rotated. अगर ये पूछ लिया Neolithic, 4-5 साल के बाद दोबारा एक क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे Neolithic से, ठीक है? अगर ये पूछ लिया तो 4-5 साल के बाद एक क्वेश्चन पूछेगा, ये पूछ लिया तो 4-5 साल के बाद एक क्वेश्चन. तो ऐसे ही मतलब अगर उन्होंने लास्ट ईयर Neolithic पूछा है, in that case you should focus more on these 2 parts. That is the trend which is noticed. And even it is not necessary that this year, like, if they have asked a question from the Neolithic, so next year they are supposed to ask a question definitely from these three parts. Not possible, ठीक है. Maybe इस साल छोड़ दिया, अगले साल लेकिन चालकोलिथिक से फिर 100% पूछेंगे या फिर जो है मेगालिथिक से पूछेंगे. This is a trend that they have been following, correct? So हम partially इसको cover, partially मतलब whatsoever dimensions like are there, we'll cover it. That's what I'm trying to do. Okay, there were some basic information that I'll be giving you. First of all, the moment you talk about the Neolithic period, unfortunately, except this Neolithic revolution, they haven't asked any question which is like, very deep as such. They are asking very general questions. They have asked questions on the Neolithic settlements. Neolithic revolution is one question which was repeated again and again, okay? And it's a famous debate, so I think it's quite possible, like, if the question is being repeated. But then there were few things, like, that can somehow, somehow increase or enhance the quality of your answer. That's one thing that, like, you should always keep in mind, that this is the largest time bracket in history, correct? It starts roughly around 1.5 1.6 million years ago. अगर हम उसको छोड़ भी दें, हम 1 million भी मान के चले, ठीक है, या फिर हम let's say 5-6 लाख साल भी पहले मान के चले, so you can imagine कि it's a history of 5-6 lakh years, correct? So it is the largest time bracket, but then we do not study much about it. And what is the reason that we do not study much about it? Sources are scarce, right? So unfortunately, the sources, okay, they do not allow us to read about it. Why? Because it's precisely based on what sort of sources? Archaeological sources. That's one thing, correct? The second important reason, because of what it's not being asked a lot to you, why? Because this particular branch is yet not fully established. You can find the consciousness for the history since the beginning, ancient times, but then people never knew about the prehistory. Prehistory as a branch of knowledge established itself only in the middle of 19th century, when like Charles Darwin's theory is coming, then Charles Lyell's principle of geology is coming. All these books were coming, and then people started understanding, there is a gradual evolution. And even the recent time also, some of the challenges are being given to all these older theories and all. So this part remains very dicey. Correct? Apart from this, there is another theory which is very much applicable, at least in the ancient India, that is known as the diffusionist theory. Now, at one hand, there are certain schools of historiography, they believe that actually all this evolution has taken place in one place. This precisely happened in one place, and then it got diffused to other parts. Now, still there were so many scholars believe in this theory. And do you know that Pangaea Island? Pangaea? Correct?
First continent.
When they were all connected. Why am I telling you about geography? Because it is believed that at that point of time, it was connected. So people could have migrated from one place to another place so easily. आप पूछ सकते हैं ना कि इतना समुद्र तार के कैसे आएंगे? टॉम हैंक्स थोड़ी है यार, है ना? टॉम हैंक्स है तो वो किसी न किसी तरीके से जो है वो सरवाइव करेगा और भागेगा. हाँ, नेपोलियन से ज़्यादा टॉम हैंक्स का जो है वो जो कौन से कास्टअवे आई गेस, कास्टअवे है ना? हाँ, नेपोलियन भी कहता, गलत नहीं है, सही कह रहे. So I think this is the, like at that point of time it was quite possible. So since it is making the history more dicey of this period, because as I told you that one school still firmly believes it happened in this way only. But then this theory I have been telling you for this reason because it is applicable for many other periods also, such as IVC and all. So according to this, every transition did take place in Europe first, and from Europe it migrated. क्यों? क्योंकि गोरे हैं वो लोग, है ना? तो गोरा आदमी पहले ट्रांजिशन करेगा, काला आदमी कैसे कर सकता है? So this is the racially biased theory, है ना? So bias ये है लेकिन diffusion theory, और as I told you that still there were so many scholars believing in this theory, correct? So this theory has been though rejected by many other scholars, and they are saying कि अरे यार अभी इसकी कोई possibility नहीं है. Why? Because you can find great amount of variations among the evolution. Look, undoubtedly certain similarities are there, and in fact those similarities became the base of the diffusionist theory. Let's say what sort of tool you find in Europe some like somehow very similar tool you find in India also. So that was like that was used by them as like base for their idea, and they said about it. But then this theory always does one thing: it ignores the differences. It always ignores the differences. Ideally speaking, the differences must be highlighted. Yeah, there are certain differences. And in fact, like there is a very simple example I'll be giving you when it comes to Neolithic transition. Correct? Na? So there they cultivate wheat. Correct? Na? When it comes to India, in the northwestern side of India, it was the wheat which was earliest crop which was cultivated. But then when it comes to the eastern side of India, it was rice. So इसका मतलब इंटरडिपेंडेंट तो नहीं है एक दूसरे से, ठीक है. सो सोचो कि इंडिया के अंदर अगर अलग अलग है, इफ दे आर वेरी डिफरेंट विद इन द कॉन्टिनेंट इटसेल्फ, राइट, सो विद इन द सब कॉन्टिनेंट इटसेल्फ, राइट. सो आई होप यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड कि देयर मस्ट बी ह्यूज डिफरेंस बिटवीन द एवोल्यूशन ऑफ नियोलिथिक इन यूरोप एंड द एवोल्यूशन ऑफ नियोलिथिक इन इंडिया. करेक्ट. So that is the whole idea. So actually this theory has been rejected, but then as I am telling you that Europeans are still believing in this theory, correct? And that's why this becomes the reason because of what, like it is not being asked enough. ठीक है. तो हमारे पास बहुत सवाल तो नहीं आएंगे Neolithic से. हम दो possible dimensions हैं. We'll just try to see from the Neolithic. So one is the very popular one. That's the Neolithic revolution. Let's say if any question is coming from the Neolithic revolution, right? First of all, you have to understand ki why is it being called as revolution. Now you have like you have done the rectification a lot. Anybody can write the answer, but then let me tell you the whole idea of revolution is based on the concept of diffuseness theory. Who propounded this term? Gordon Childe. And Gordon Childe was a firm believer in the diffuseness theory. So according to him, the transition which is known as Neolithic precisely happened in one place, and then it got spread to the other regions. That's the main idea behind it. But I think majority of the people do not write about this diffuseness theory. While writing the answers, you should definitely mention this. Now basically he believed it was somewhere in the West Asia, this Jericho and all these places, like this transition has happened, and then it is getting spread to the other areas. The way it happens in the revolution, French Revolution has taken place in only one place, that's called as France, and then the ideas of the French Revolution got spread to the other regions. That's the simple thing. So according to him also something very similar happened to this also, Neolithic revolution, right? And then he writes कि why it is revolution, because revolution is like basically those events are called as revolutions which are happening in a shorter period of time, and then it is having so much potential that it can change the whole like sort of thing with respect to the human society and all. That's called as revolution. Correct? Na? So first of all, as I told you that he believes that it happened in one place, that's number one, okay? And then he also believes it has changed the life drastically of the people. That's again correct. After the so many things happening, such as they started beginning agriculture, settled life, and then the notion of family is coming, the notion of labor is coming, and then wheel is being discovered, right? All these changes that you find in the human life, that happens because of this. Correct. So बोलते हैं कि वो बहुत important है यार, ये revolution है. So Gordon Childe is the person, since he is believing in the diffusionist theory, he gives the idea of Neolithic revolution. Correct. But then this is countered. How come it's being countered? ठीक है. So it's Gordon Childe's theory who is talking about this here, and this is the oasis theory. Do you know about this oasis theory? नहीं, कोई idea नहीं oasis theory. Oasis theory क्या कहती है? It's a very simple theory, right? But then he presents it in a very beautiful way. He says कि let's say this is the West Asia. So there was one period when the whole world was covered of ice, but then it gradually became warmer, and then it became more warmer, and that's how certain deserts appeared in the world. The same happened to West Asia also. And when it happened to West Asia, so since this whole region was deserted, right, there were certain water bodies, they somehow survived somewhere. There are certain water bodies, they appeared. And these water bodies were known as oases. Correct? No? Now what happened? Now it is a general tendency. Ki suppose somebody was living here. Why? Because he was a human being. He was living here, water was available, and he was there. Now since water is available only here, so this person would move to here. And then he says ki it is a general tendency shown among everybody, मतलब everybody मतलब not only human being but even plants and animals. When you travel through the desert, you can find that wherever there is a like oasis or the water body, now you'll find the greenery over there, the plantations are there, vegetations are there, okay? And in fact agriculture is being practiced, and then you find further like animals are also confined like in this place only, correct? So this like according to him, so because of this creation or the genesis of this oasis, the people have like not only human being but even the animals and the plants also came closer to that water body. And since they all started living in a close proximity, that has developed a better understanding among themselves. And that's how they learn domestication of plants. Human beings learn domestication of plants and the domestication of animals. That's the idea, theory given by him. So since it happened precisely in the West Asia, and that's how he believes it happened precisely in one place and then it is migrating to the other place. That is the theory. Correct? Okay. But then it is rejected. Okay. Why it is rejected? Because now people are rejecting on many grounds. First of all, the rejection is there on the basis of what? Ki actually it is not a revolution taking place in one place. It is Robert Braidwood's basically the hilly flank theory. What is this hilly flank theory? It says कि it happens in multiple nuclear zones. This is what I had been just now discussing. इंडिया में भी हो रहा है. इंडिया में अलग अलग जगह पे अलग अलग तरीके से हो रहा है. तो ऐसे ही दुनिया में अफ्रीका में हो रहा है, ऑस्ट्रेलिया में हो रहा है, अमेरिका में हो रहा है, हर जगह दुनिया में हो रही है. ठीक है. So that's why he says that like nothing. ठीक है. Agriculture developed gradually. And one more idea that he has been giving कि it is happening gradually. Revolution never happens gradually. Gradually changes होते हैं. Revolution brings the changes in a more faster manner. That's the whole idea. Then it is being rejected on the basis of by Louis Binford also, and he gives this population theory, the marginal habitat hypothesis that he gives. Right? What is that? He says that actually there was certain pressure because of these changes were happening. So it is not something which is happening by accidentally. So certain natural demands or needs are coming because of what it is happening. So basically on this gradual versus sudden transition that I have already discussed, correct? Then it comes to impacts on society. Again, this is not something which is directly impacting on the society. You literally believe that the day they learnt about agriculture, from the next day only they became dependent on the agriculture. It's impossible. Correct. So they must have consumed much time to be wholly dependent on the agriculture. That's how it is there. Regional variation and the interdependence. Revolutions, revolutions always takes place in one place, and then it is getting spread to the other part. So that's how you do not find much variation. On the other hand, in the Neolithic you find great amount of variations, right? So multiple centers were there of domestication and everything was there, and that's why we reject this idea of calling it what? The Neolithic revolution, correct? There is another idea, and this is about the Neolithic settlements. ये factual है यार, इसमें कुछ बताने के लिए कुछ है नहीं. मैंने पहले भी कहा कि in India there are several zones where this transition can be noted. That start from the northwestern region, that's Mehergarh. Now this is pretty similar to that western transition, correct? So everything is very different. Time is different. The process is different, right? Then it comes to northern region, that's Kashmir. Again, it appears very late, somewhere around 3000 BC. And in fact, culture is also very different. It's the spit dwells and all these things are are being used by them. So it's very different from that. So this is the another. Then one is Vindhya Hills and the Velan Valley that you see in the Mirzapur and then all these places. That is the third place. Then it is mid-eastern Gangetic plains. Basically Bihar वाला जो region है, चिरान विरान जो सब जगह है, वो एक अलग नियोलिथिक है. राइस के हिसाब, राइस तो खैर यहाँ पे भी होता है, यहाँ पे भी राइस का है. But then with the help of the tools and all, we can understand it's a different culture. It's not the same culture, right? And apart from that, central eastern regions, basically Chota Nagpur Plateau and all these places, very it's also 3000 BC. It's also different. Northeastern part of it, Assam में दाउजली हादिंग and all these places are there. Again यहाँ पे भी कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो एकदम missing है यहाँ पे. And finally South India, which is called as the Asp Mound side, that also stands very different and it's very late also. ठीक है. In fact 3000 से भी बाद में 1500 के आसपास तक ये चलती है. So this is how you can find कि these are the various nuclear zones where the Neolithic. This question has been also asked by them once. So these are two things. ठीक है. and then understand what are this important features. So that's how we can say as far as this Neolithic is concerned, in Neolithic these are the things that could have been discussed. Correct? Neolithic से questions भी यही दोनों पूछे, but हालांकि हम next class में इसको discuss करेंगे. ठीक है?